Have you ever worked yourself to the bone for people who were ashamed to admit you existed? I'm a night shift nurse. I've been one since I was 23. I clock in at 7 p.m. and I clock out at 7 a.m., and in between those hours I hold people's hands while they're terrified. I call doctors at 2 in the morning with lab values that can't wait. I memorize medication schedules for 12 patients at once. And I drive home in the pale early light when the rest of the world is just waking up. I've cried in my car in hospital parking garages more times than I can count, not because the job broke me, because it didn't. I love what I do, but my family called it settling. Let me back up. When my father got sick, really sick, the kind of sick that reorganizes your whole life without asking permission, I was 19 and in my second year of pre-med at a state school 3 hours from home. My brother was 24, freshly minted with a finance degree, already working at a firm downtown. My mother called me first. She always called me first. Not because I was closer, not because I was older, but because somewhere along the way it had been silently decided that I was the one who would handle things. The hard things, the invisible things. I came home. I enrolled in a nursing program at the community college nearby, because it was faster and cheaper, and because someone needed to be there when his blood pressure dropped or when he got infused at night, or when my mother, who worked double shifts at a dental office, couldn't take another phone call from a home health aide who didn't show up. My brother sent money when he could. He came home for Christmas. He called every Sunday. He did not come home when Dad spent 4 days in the ICU in March. He sent flowers. I'm not bitter about that. Not anymore. I've made my peace with who my brother is and what he's able to give. What I'm telling you is just the ground we're standing on so you understand what came later. Dad recovered. Not fully, he never fully recovered. But enough. Enough that I could breathe again. Enough that I finished my program, passed my boards, got hired at the hospital 20 minutes from my parents' house. I stayed. I told myself it was temporary. That was 7 years ago. During those 7 years, I became the person who drove my mother to her own appointments, who researched the new medication my father's cardiologist suggested before anyone else even read the pamphlet, who transferred money to my parents' account every single month to help with the mortgage on the house I grew up in. Not because they asked me to, at first, because I looked at their bank statements once when my mother needed help disputing a charge, and I saw the number and I couldn't unsee it. My brother knew I was helping, we never talked about it directly. It was one of those family truths that everyone understood and nobody named. He was, in the meantime, becoming what my mother described to her friends as very successful. He married a woman who worked in tech. They bought a house in a good neighborhood. They had a son who was, according to my mother, exceptionally bright. She showed me his photos constantly. She lit up when she talked about him. She lit up differently when she talked about me. Not badly, exactly, more like carefully. Like she was choosing her words. She'd say, "She works at the hospital," and leave a pause afterward that I learned not to fill. She'd say, "She's still figuring things out to her friends," which I heard once from the next room and didn't say anything about. She was proud of my brother's life in a way she displayed openly, like a painting on the wall. She was proud of me. I think she was, in a way she kept in a drawer. I told myself it was generational. I told myself she didn't understand what nurses actually do. I told myself a lot of things. Then came my brother's wedding anniversary party, the big one, 10 years. My sister-in-law's family was flying in from out of state. They were renting out a private room at a restaurant I'd never been to because it wasn't the kind of place I could afford on a regular basis. My mother had been talking about it for 2 months, the guest list, the menu, the centerpieces. She was involved in the planning in a way that made her happy, and I was happy for her to be happy. 3 weeks before the party, my mother sent a message in the family group chat. I was on break at work, sitting in the break room with bad coffee, and the particular bone tiredness that hits around 4 a.m. and my phone buzzed, and I opened it, and I read it, and then I read it again. Just a reminder that the party will have a professional photographer for family portraits. Since it's a formal occasion and the Hendersons will be there, we're planning the portraits with immediate family, the ones who've really made something of themselves. Want to make sure we put the best face forward as a family. Love you all. She did not tag me. I sat there for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the hall a monitor beeped, She did not tag me. I read the message 3 times to make sure I wasn't misreading it. The group chat had me, my brother, my sister-in-law, and my mother. There was no ambiguity. There was no way to read it that didn't mean what it meant. My brother responded with a thumbs-up emoji. My sister-in-law sent a heart. I put my phone face down on the table and went back to work, because I had 4 patients waiting, and one of them had a fever I was watching, and because there was nothing else to do at 4 in the morning in a hospital break room after your mother has just told you, that you are not the face she wants to put forward. Have you ever watched your own mother reduce you to a liability in 11 words? Tell me where you're watching from right now and what time it is. I want to know who else is up at this hour, because they can't sleep either. I didn't respond to the message that night. I didn't respond the next day. I kept thinking I would find the right words, and I kept not finding them, and after a week I realized the reason I couldn't find them was that there weren't any. Nothing I could say would make my mother understand something she had chosen, at 61 years old, not to understand. She had looked at the life I built, the decade I spent showing up, the money I moved into her account every month, the nights I sat with my father when he was scared, and she was exhausted. The career I chose, specifically because of what our family went through, and she had decided it wasn't the kind of success worth photographing. So I didn't say anything. I just stopped. I didn't go to the party. I texted my brother the morning of, said I wasn't feeling well, kept it simple. He said feel better, and that was the end of it. I don't know if he ever connected the dots. I don't know if he wanted to. What I did that night instead, I ordered Thai food. I watched 2 episodes of a show I'd been putting off. I went to bed at 9 o'clock and slept for 11 hours straight, which I hadn't done in years. It felt, in a strange way, like something releasing, like I had been holding a door closed against something heavy for a long time, and I had finally just stepped back and let it go where it was going. The next month, I didn't transfer the money to my parents' account. I didn't announce it. I didn't send a message. I didn't explain. I just didn't do it. I want to be honest about how that felt, because I don't want to make it sound cleaner than it was. It felt terrible. I was raised to take care of people. I was raised to show up. Walking away from something I'd done every month for years felt wrong in my body in a way that was hard to sit with. I lay awake that first night, thinking about their account balance and whether they'd noticed and what they were going to do. And then I thought about that message. The ones who've really made something of themselves. And I thought about my brother's thumbs up. And I went to sleep. I reduced my contact with my mother gradually, the way you turn down a volume rather than cutting the cord. Fewer calls, shorter visits, polite, warm, present when I had to be, but not available, not the way I had been. When she called to tell me about my brother's son's soccer tournament, I listened. When she asked if I was coming for Thanksgiving, I said I'd let her know. I stopped being the person she could count on to always say yes. I stopped making myself the solution to every problem she hadn't mentioned yet. It took her 4 months to notice. Not the money. She noticed the money almost immediately. My father mentioned it in a phone call, in a roundabout way that made it clear he'd been asked to bring it up. I said I'd had some unexpected expenses and I'd see what I could do. I didn't see what I could do. What she noticed after 4 months was that I had become somehow less present, less reachable, less eager. She couldn't have said exactly what was different. Nothing dramatic had happened. I hadn't screamed at her, or sent a long accusatory text, or made a scene. I had just quietly become someone with less space in her life for people who found her embarrassing. She called me on a Tuesday in February, not a holiday, not a special occasion, and I let it go to voicemail. She left a message asking if everything was okay, saying she felt like things had been strange between us, saying she hoped she hadn't done anything to upset me. Her voice was careful in a way I recognized. She was trying to open a door without admitting there might be a reason it was closed. I listened to the message twice and I thought about calling back. I thought about it for a long time. I didn't call back. Not yet. I wasn't ready to have a conversation that she was ready to have honestly. I wasn't ready to explain something she was going to deny or minimize or turn into a misunderstanding. I needed more time to become more certain of myself, more settled in the version of my life that didn't require her approval to feel real. So I kept going. I kept working my night shifts. I started picking up extra hours in the ER, which I'd been avoiding because the ER is its own specific kind of chaos, but I found I was good at it, faster than I expected. Something about knowing exactly what mattered, when to move, when to wait, who needed the most right now, translated easily. My charge nurse started pulling me into harder assignments. My manager mentioned something about a lead role that was opening up. I had friends, I had a life. I had a small apartment that I'd painted the colors I wanted and filled with plants I remembered to water. I had colleagues who called me when they needed someone to think through a complicated situation. I had skills my mother didn't know the names of. 18 months after the anniversary party, I got a call from my brother. Not a text, a call, which was unusual enough that I answered it in a parking lot before I'd even gotten into my car. He sounded off. He stumbled a little getting into it, the way people do when they've rehearsed something and then forgotten their lines. He said Mom and Dad had hit a rough patch financially. Dad's medication costs had gone up. There had been some repairs on the house. He was helping as much as he could, but with the mortgage and the kid and everything. I let him finish. I didn't interrupt. I let him say the whole thing. Then I said, "How much have you been sending them?" There was a pause. He named a number. It was half of what I had been sending, and he'd been sending it for a year. I had been sending my amount for 6 years. I said, "I see." He said, I don't know exactly, but I know you've been helping too. So I thought maybe we could figure something out together. I said, "I stopped sending them money a while back." Another pause. "Oh," he said, "yeah, how long?" "About a year and a half." He went quiet in a way that told me he was doing math. Adding up what that meant about the months between, about what my parents had been managing without, about whether anyone had mentioned it to him, or whether he was only finding out now, because the gap had finally gotten too big to paper over. "Can I ask why?" he said. I had thought about this moment. I had imagined a lot of versions of it. In some versions I was cold. In some versions I cried. In the one that actually happened, I was just tired, and honest in the way you get when you're tired, and I said, "Mom sent a message in the family group chat before your anniversary party. About the photographer. About who counted as successful enough to be in the family portraits." Silence. "I saw that," he said finally, quietly. "You sent a thumbs up." He didn't say anything. "I've been paying that mortgage since Dad got sick," I said. "I left school to be here. I picked a career around being available." And she told the Hendersons she was putting the best face forward and didn't include me in that sentence. I stopped. I didn't want to get louder. I wasn't trying to make him feel small. I was just saying what was true. I needed to stop for a while. I needed to figure out if I was okay with things being the way they were, and I decided I wasn't. He said, "Emma, I didn't." "Please don't use that name," I said. "My name is, you know what, never mind. I know you didn't do it on purpose. I know Mom didn't mean for it to land the way it did. But it did land. And I needed some time." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. He said, "You're right. What she wrote was wrong. What I did was wrong. I should have said something." I didn't cry. I had cried about it before, a long time ago. In the car after a long shift, when it was safe to. I had used up those tears already. What I felt now was something more like recognition. Like a door had been left open a crack and the light on the other side was familiar. I said, "I appreciate that. What do I do?" he asked. "About Mom and Dad?" "You figure out a plan with them that doesn't depend on me carrying the weight quietly." "That's what I'd do. And you? Are you okay?" I thought about my apartment, my plants. The lead role my manager had brought up again last week, more specifically this time, with a timeline. I thought about driving home in the early morning light last Thursday and stopping for coffee at a place I loved and sitting in my car for 20 minutes, just because I could, just because it was quiet, and I had nowhere to be, and nobody needed anything from me. "I'm better than I've been in a long time," I said. My brother called my mother after we hung up. I don't know exactly what was said. She called me the following evening, and this time I answered, because I felt ready in a way I hadn't before. She started carefully. She said she'd been thinking about the party planning message and she wasn't sure it had come out right. I let her get there on her own terms, and I didn't rush her, and I didn't perform forgiveness I didn't yet feel. I said, "It came out exactly what it was. You decided I wasn't successful enough to stand next to you in a photograph, and you said so in writing, and my brother and sister-in-law agreed. And I heard that. I took it seriously. She got quiet. I have been helping you financially for 6 years, I said. You've never mentioned it to your friends. You've never introduced me as someone who's sacrificed something real for this family. You've told people I'm still figuring things out. I heard that too. I didn't think you. I've always thought I didn't notice, I said. That's the thing about being the invisible one. Everyone assumes you can't see what's happening. She cried a little. I didn't try to stop her or comfort her past a point. This was a conversation that needed to be uncomfortable. Comfort would come later, maybe, if we both did the work. She said she was sorry. She said she had been wrong. She said she had always been proud of me, but that she hadn't known how to say it in the right way, hadn't understood what my work meant, hadn't thought about how her words landed when she was trying to manage everyone's impressions of everything. I said, I know. That's the part I believe. Will you come for Christmas? She asked. I said I'd let her know. And I meant it. Not as a punishment, but as the truth. I didn't know yet. I was still deciding what the relationship could be now that we were both being honest about what it had been. What I knew was this. I was 31 years old. I had a career I was good at, in a field that mattered. I had an apartment I loved and a life I had built during the hours my family spent being impressed by other people. I had held strangers' hands in the dark and helped them through the worst nights of their lives. I had kept the lights on in my parents' house for 6 years without a single word of acknowledgement. I was not the person my mother found easiest to brag about. I was the person who showed up when it mattered, quietly, before anyone else thought to. There is no amount of success that justifies making someone feel invisible. Not a job title, not a house in a good neighborhood, not a photographer at a party. Honest work done with love is not something to hide. It never was. My brother now sends my parents twice what he was sending before. He called me last month to ask what doctors my father sees, what his medication schedule looks like. He was writing it down. It was the first time he'd ever written it down. I don't know what my mother tells her friends about me now. Maybe something different. Maybe the same. I'm not sure it matters to me the way it used to. What matters is that the next time someone in this family needs someone to show up, they will know exactly where to find me. And they will also know that I am someone who knows my own worth. That the two things can both be true. That I can love them and still have walked away when I needed to. The morning after I talked to my mother, I drove to work in the dark like I always do. I parked in the garage, took the elevator up, changed into my scrubs. My charge nurse handed me my assignment and said we had a complicated admit coming in around midnight. I said I'd handle it, and I did.